This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horrors, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff, repping the 80s.
I'm Ryan, repping those 90s.
Ladies and gentlemen, doom comes in many forms, be it the inexorable hellfire of a streaking missile or the intractable jaws of man's best fiend. Find out whose time is up when Are You Afraid of the Dark meets Twilight Zone in this time-killing, spine-chilling, cadaverous cosmic contest. You're just in time for Put Up Your Spoons!
This week's theme:
Time to Die. So it's a brand new year, and the new year always puts me in mind of the subject of time. We're looking to a new year. We're often recapping the year that just went by. We're thinking predictions, resolutions, and I feel like the tradition on Put Up Your Spooks is to do a show about time travel.
My episode is a crazy, kooky one. That's a mysterious and spooky one. And it's Are You Afraid of the Dark?
The Tale of the Hungry Hounds.
Pam lives out in the country. Her cousin Amy is visiting from the city. And Amy's really a city girl. They're rummaging around in Pam's attic, where her mother never throws anything away, including stuff from her ancestors, as quoted in the episode. Mom really has trouble letting go of the past. Amy, city cousin, puts up a real nice ghost spook, pretending to be a specter. She spooks Pam, but says, "You stupid, I don't believe in ghosts anyway." And then a ghost knocks over a box of her Aunt Dora's riding stuff, horse riding stuff. They find Aunt Dora's locked trunk from 1963, but they can't open it, it's locked. So later on, they're walking down a dirt road, and Pam shows Amy this horse that she absolutely loves, whose owners live in the city. She's about to get on and ride that thing bareback.
Black Beauty style.
But just then her mom drives up and blasts the car horn, spooking the horse and almost killing Pam. And then mom is like, "What are you doing? How dare you?"
So Pam's mom put up her spooks.
Yeah.
Wildly irresponsible to blast the horn while your daughter has one leg over a horse. Yeah, that could have gotten us into death and ghost territory even faster.
Later on, in broad daylight, Pam and Amy are doing a Ouija board, and it's a real Ouija board. Eat shit, Parker Brothers, or whatever, whoever owns that these days, and makes it so that you can't use a Ouija board on movies. The board spells out, "Let me out." The cousin goes,
Late now. No. It's spelled, let me out.
That makes me laugh.
Well, this was a bilingual Ouija board.
Oh, was it? I didn't even notice.
Yeah, it had
French on it.
It had
Wait a second.
avoir at the bottom.
Oh, did it? That's really funny. I was gonna laugh at that joke because a bilingual French and English Ouija board just looks exactly the same. So the board also gives them a series of 3 numbers, which they recognize as possibly a combination to a trunk.
This is some escape room stuff. I was loving it.
Totally, yeah. You have to go here. You gotta find this thing. You gotta get that thing. You gotta open that thing. You gotta spook the horse. So they go up, they open the trunk, a mouse puts up its spooks, and then they find Aunt Dora's old, beautiful, British-style riding clothes.
So,
and lots of smoke.
are we not... Yeah. They pop this trunk, and 1,000 cubic meters of vapor come boiling out, and I was like, oh, that's not good. That's like asbestos and radium, or...
It's all ammonia.
Yeah, it...
Chlorine gas.
It's terrifying. If I opened a trunk and saw that much vapor came out, I would run away, hopefully, make it outside to fresh air, and then, call the fire department or the CDC.
But they don't even notice. They're like, oh,
breathe it in.
Dust and grass, ew. So Pam puts on the coat and gets, super possessed. The coat puts up its spooks.
Frosty style.
And stands her up in a column of more steam and vapor and ethereal light. And she's just instantly out of it.
You know they're tripping on mothballs, right?
Super tripping. Or mold spores. Because they also, when they open up the trunk, she says they must have never washed this stuff after the last time she wore it, which was...
When she
I
died?
think when she died. Although it's possible not, because as we'll see later,
But
her final ride was a bit of a spur-of-the-moment thing.
but definitely black mold is eating their
100%,
brains.
Yeah. So a huge round door, an impossible door, opens up in the wall of the attic. And on the other side, it's nighttime, even though, as we've just discussed, it was broad daylight mere moments ago. So they go through, well, Pam kind of like in a daze, in a fugue state, wanders through the door, and Amy follows her. And on the other side, it's pretty cool. The door is just kind of suspended in midair with a big metal staircase leading down. So they go down, they wander through the woods. Amy's trying to snap Pam out of it. They find a cemetery full of members of their family going back generations. And they have my favorite gravestone, which is...
As you are, so was I. As I am, so will you be. Nice thought.
Time to die. They find Aunt Dora's grave with a bone from Mon Petit Rouge, who leaves Dora presents, she explains. She tells Amy the story of the hounds and the hunt, which is one of the things that's always thrown me, because as we saw from the trunk, it was 1963, but to me a fox hunt is like a much earlier thing.
That's like colonial America.
Yeah, perhaps they were still doing it, I don't know.
I don't think they were doing fox
Mon
hunts.
Petit
in the
Rouge
60s,
is the fox that they had been keeping for a fox hunt,
which
and
is
she
also,
befriended it.
I'm not sure how that's how it works either. I don't know.
Well, I mean that
they
you have
keep a
to.
fox.
Yeah, I think you have to get the hounds the scent of the fox, and then you release it so they can chase the scent down.
They are hunting hounds, and you don't just hunt one fox. You would hunt like dozens of foxes, I believe.
No, I don't. Honestly, I don't think so. I think you just hunt down one fox and kill it. It's like a riding sport more than anything. I'm not sure, though. I'd have to look it up.
I guess it's a matter of, are you just doing it before tea time? Because I feel like there were all-day drunken festivals where you would just slaughter foxes all day, and it was great sport.
Possibly. I mean, they certainly did that stuff with like bird hunting and whatnot.
Right.
So she couldn't...
I feel like I was at a museum and I saw something recently. It was like a bachelor party. There was a bunch of dudes on horses, and there was just like piles and piles of dead foxes.
Maybe.
That may have,
probably.
May have been,
You're probably right.
Out of the ordinary and like excessive for a princess.
It was just for the sake of art
or something. Yeah.
Aunt Dora, as a teenager, was friends with the fox, and she couldn't stand the idea of the fox getting hunted and killed, so she let it go. The hounds were furious and like banging at the doors of their enclosure. She decided to get on her horse and ride after the fox to make sure it gets away or something. But then something spooks the horse, and
Probably
that's how she
her
dies.
mom in the future.
Probably no, her sister. It would be her 10-year-old sister.
Her 10-year-old sister with
her on her
a
first
noisemaker.
drive.
Auga.
So I doubt she had time to put on her fancy riding clothes to go on that midnight fox ride.
Maybe she was just rocking them 24/7.
She was bareback in more ways than one. Lady Godiva. So they're like in the graveyard telling this story, and then old man Giles appears and puts up his spooks, and he's like, Dora, why didn't you feed the hounds? And this guy actually shows up in a few episodes. He's almost to the level of a Sardo or a Dr. Vink.
Giles has been flower bombed. He is white and crusty.
He's a ghost, 100%. Although when he's in other episodes, he doesn't play the same character. He essentially does. He plays old ghost man in overalls every single time.
Good work if you can get it. If you get cast as old ghost man number
Typecast.
1, you are definitely going to work in Are You Afraid of the Dark?
So Dora's like, I'm sorry, I should have... I'll go to feed them now. And he goes,
You should have fed them while they were alive.
And then he's like, I tried to feed them, but they were so hungry and they snapped at me. And I always remember him getting torn apart by the hounds, but he's actually like, I got away, but then I had a heart attack and I died. It was time to die.
Which is kind of a cop-out because it
Maybe
was...
they felt like it was too gruesome for a guy to be torn
100%.
apart by
It was too gruesome that he got torn apart by hungry hounds. So it was hungry hounds plus heart attack.
hungry houndos.
Yes.
And they run away from him, and they hide in a barn, and someone locks them in from the outside, presumably Old Man Giles. And they can hear the hounds on the other side of an enclosure, like banging away on the doors and barking and trying to get out. And Pam/Dora is like, I've got to feed the hounds. I've got to feed the hounds. And then Amy's like, no, fuck that. And she locks Dora in a horse stall. And then so Amy agrees to feed the hounds some kibble, which is in another room in a giant 90-pound sack. So as she's going to get that, Dora uses a riding crop to release herself from the stall. And she's like, fugue state, slowly creeping up on the hound's door while Amy desperately tries to drag a 90-pound sack of kibble there, but she doesn't make it in time. Dora unleashes the hounds and then disappears. Amy climbs a bunch of hay bales to escape, but they're up there, they're climbing, they're almost on her. But then Mon Petit Rouge shows up and leads the hounds away and saves Amy's life. So Amy's like, Pam, Dora, and she goes outside the barn, which is open, and then she sees Dora in full English-style riding gear outside, astride a white charger, and she rides away into the forest, and Amy can't find her anymore, so she climbs the phantom stairs back into the 1990s, and Pam emerges from some old dusty clothes, sneezing and coughing. She still has the coat on, but she's back to her old self. Pam says, what are you talking about? Whatever. I was right here the whole time. Anyway, I gotta go feed the dogs.
What dogs? You only have one. That's what I said. I have to feed the dog. You said dogs. You said I have to feed the dogs. Did not. You did too. Did not. Did too. Who cares what I said? What's wrong with you?
The end. My question for you is this a time travel episode, or have they just slipped into the ghost dimension? Because Amy is there, whatever it is.
City Girl is there. The body of Country Girl is there, inhabited by the soul of her aunt.
And Giles is a ghost.
Giles is a ghost.
And the hounds are actually ghosts.
That fox,
and Mon Petit Rouge is a ghost.
probably also a ghost. But it happened in the past.
They go back to Ghost 1963.
Yes.
So it's a little bit of both, perhaps?
It's a bit transmigration of souls. It's a bit... anytime you go into the ghost dimension, I feel like you are traveling to the past in some way.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's a form of time travel, yeah.
So it is a bit of a slow, odd episode, but I always liked how weird and surreal and trippy and sort of confusing it was. And as a child, I could never reconcile. It always felt like they went back to a much, much earlier time than the 1960s, because the Old Man Giles is like a 1930s ghost, although he was old in the 1960s, so, you wear the clothes of your youth, I suppose. But, he's like an old 1930s dude. Fox hunting and hounds always, to me, felt much, much older. So I was always like, I don't understand. And I don't think I always put it together that she was being possessed by her aunt. Those are the details I maybe kind of glossed over in the sort of boring first act, where they're just, wandering around in fields.
I think to kids in the 90s, just probably like kids today, the 1960s may as well have been colonial America or Edwardian England, because it's all so far
it's
in
all
the
just kind of a
distant
jumble.
past.
That's kind of cool, actually. But it doesn't necessarily make sense for this story.
It speaks to the amnesia of our species and our...
production designers.
production designers and our inability to learn history. I don't think it's that cool.
Well, no, I meant cool from like a storytelling sense, how everything's like weird and jumbled together. But again, not appropriate for this particular story. It would have to be some other kind of. It would have to be a deliberate choice that you made to make some kind of point.
Yeah, and if I read this correctly, this was only the 5th episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh yeah. Well, it's got all the original Midnight Society in there.
Yeah, so season 1, episode 5, it definitely has that Are You Afraid of the Dark vibe of weird, incoherent, childlike storytelling that we've kind of missed for a while. We've been doing stuff from later seasons where the stories are tighter. So that was interesting, but I felt like the elements of a interesting odd tale were there. Going back in time, saving the aunt from dying, perhaps. The idea
anything other than nothing, I suppose.
Yeah, the idea of being tormented by these hounds that starved or something. It's tragic that Dora died in a horseback riding incident. I don't know why the family would then choose to starve the hounds to death.
Dora was supposed to feed the hounds. I don't know if anyone else was around.
There was a whole fox hunt planned for that day.
Yeah. They had been starving the hounds to make them ravenous for fox.
Right.
And Dora wasn't supposed to feed them because
Dora was supposed to feed them.
It doesn't make any sense because they were supposed to be starved for the hunt. So why would it have been her? Because Giles is like, you should have fed them, but the whole point is not to feed them.
Yeah, so none of this should be down on Dora's fate.
No, yeah.
It's just that she died in proximity to hounds that were hungry. So even though all those hounds were later fed kibble and lived long natural lives...
No, they weren't. They died. They starved to death.
Why would the family...
Maybe they were too grief-stricken over Dora's accidental, unrelated death.
So did they let the horse die also, or?
So they just the horse and Mon Petit Rouge wandered off and became friends in Narnia.
That's a bunch of nonsense. None of that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's the fact that Dora died suddenly and violently soon after the old man died suddenly and violently. Oh.
Maybe this is why I was just so confused by the episode as a child.
It was a big jumble of stuff. It didn't make sense, and I felt like the ingredients were there to make an interesting story, but it did not come together. It was very slow and dull. The legend should have been more like that Dora was torn apart by hungry hounds or something.
Yeah, most definitely.
Because the whole hungry hound aspect is something that just appears at the very end. Anyway.
But then you can't have your main character have a wish that's going unfulfilled because the mom doesn't want Pam to ride because her sister was killed in a horse riding accident. If the sister was killed by hounds, then Pam's wish would have been to like have a dog or something.
I hear you, and I'm not saying that in actuality she should have been torn apart by hungry hounds. More like that should have been part of the family story so that the menace was there from the beginning.
Yeah.
Because the only setup was that in modern day, these kids were constantly nagged to feed the hounds.
Yeah, the whole hound thing is like wildly unrelated to anything else in the family but again, that's kind of in a weird way what I like about it.
So watching this as a kid, when a lot of stuff didn't make sense, I could see this having an impression on you because...
It is almost like an impressionistic.
It's impressionistic piece. And strange. Watching it as an adult, it's like they just failed. They just all these shots missed.
They very clearly had a barn, like a cool, craggy old barn that they could make use of, and I'm sure that part of the failing is them desperately trying to shoehorn something into this barn that they had access to, because they did that a lot.
They had an attic, they had a barn, and they had a weird staircase, which looked really cool.
from a high school play.
Yeah, and a field. Somewhere. Probably that attic was attached to that barn, and that's the only building they had. This was
Most
episode
likely.
5.
Yeah.
They weren't doing Big Ten. 2 anecdotes. One is that we had an attic in my house growing up, and my parents never threw anything away either. But the attic was creepy. It was full of spiders and exposed nails, and it was an unfinished attic, so there were blank spots just full of insulation foam, which I'd learned the hard way is like really itchy. This like horrible fiberglass pink toxic stuff gets into your skin, and then it doesn't matter how many times your parents tell you not to touch it, like it looks like cotton candy. How can you not touch it?
We had a room above the garage with all that stuff,
Yeah.
and we used to slash it as children because it was fun to watch like the pink slashes open up, in the brown paper.
And put dust into your lungs, no doubt.
Yeah.
We had a huge basement, and part of that was the back basement with the boiler and all, the freezer, the ice box, and all that stuff. And there was stuff there that like seemed like it was from the Titanic, like big steamer trunks from my grandparents and stuff like that.
Oh shit!
Furniture that like was never used, and just sort of pushed back further and further as more and more hand-me-downs were generated by my older brothers and sisters. Old ice skates and just rusty tools and stuff.
Just
back
a great place to poke around.
100%. And so the episode starts with a rainy day, and the cousins are just kind of poking around through the old stuff. And I was like, yeah, that does sound like a good rainy day to me. That kind of takes me back. But at one point, they use a Ouija board, which we called Ouija boards for some reason. And I remember, I think it was my sister's friend who was like, oh, let's use the Ouija board. And back then, Parker Brothers or not, this was kind of scary stuff. This was satanic panic. The devil was real. And so even though I didn't really believe that we were going to contact spirits or anything, I was like, all right, I'll see what this is about. So she's like, okay, you put your fingers on this side gently, don't push, and the spirit is going to move the little window around, the planchette. And so I was like, okay, and the planchette started to move from letter to letter. It started to spell out a name or something. And the feeling of it moving with zero input and just feeling it being like dragged around the board was one of like the spookiest, skin crawlingest things I'd ever felt. And I was like, are you doing that? Are you doing that? And she's like, no. I was gullible. I didn't realize that my sister's friend would like prank me. It just didn't occur to me. And like for a second, I was like, spirits are real. Ouija boards work. This is so spooky. And then she and my sister started laughing, and then I was like, all right, magic is dead. There's no such thing as spooks. That was my Ouija board experience. Did you ever mess around with one?
Never once.
I don't even believe in this stuff. And you shouldn't be scared.
My episode is an infamous installment of the 1980s Twilight Zone called A Little Peace and Quiet. A harried mother, played by Melinda Dillon, wakes up to a blaring alarm clock. She tries to make breakfast for her 4 shrieking brats and her feckless husband, while timers, alarms, telephones, a faulty washing machine, the family dog, and a boombox blast noise. Her son finds a dead snake in the driveway and puts it on the grill. Her family sucks.
Yeah, really, really sucks.
Later, she digs up a mysterious box in the garden containing a gold sundial pendant. If only the neighbor would quit taking the chainsaw to that tree, and the radio would stop blabbing about peace talks with the Russians. No time for that. It's off to the grocery store to battle shoppers and resist her child's pleas for Choco Poppers.
Get the kids some Choco Poppers. Mind your own business.
Yeah, lady. Jesus Christ.
She was a plant from the Choco Poppers Corporation. Just a little guerrilla marketing there. So she gets the groceries and all the kids home, but the racket continues until she breaks down and tells everyone to shut up. They do. Time has stopped for everyone but her. And they didn't have freeze frame technology, I guess. So the actors just had to stand still.
They did so good.
They did fine in the scenes with the children. If you watch them on like a normal screen, you could see they are jiggling and wiggling all over the place. There's one sequence where the little boy is like cracking up. Anyway, time is stopped for everyone but her. She quickly performs a few experiments and figures out that as long as she's wearing the pendant, she can make time stop by saying something like shut up and start up again by saying start talking. That night, the peace talks are on the news, and she tells the news anchor to shut up, and they do. Her powers seem limitless. The next day, she stops time to have a quiet breakfast and shop for groceries with no hassle. She even steals the last box of Choco Poppers from some shrew.
Mine. My kids have been asking for Choco Poppers all week.
Then she stuffs a wad of cash into the frozen grocery store manager's mouth and sees an attractive preppy man in the parking lot.
She has a shopping cart full to bursting with groceries, right?
Yeah.
She gives the clerk a generous $51 or so.
51. Now. Oh, do it.
These days, I spend $50-$60 just on a little hand basket of groceries.
Inflation, am I right?
I was so furious. Anyway, continue.
She sees an attractive preppy man in the parking lot, and she can't resist. She pokes his rear
With one finger.
and then dries off, giggling with delight. Probably sniffing her finger. Little freak. Some losers come and knock at her door. They want her to come to the debate about nuclear weapons. She freezes time and drags them off her porch.
No, I don't have the time. Actually, I do have the time. It's just that I don't want to waste my time on some stuffy old debate. So, goodbye to you.
So in my recollection of this episode, she dragged the guy and girl off and then stacked them on top of each other as like a lewd joke, but she really just drags them out to her lawn.
I thought she was going to accidentally drop one of them and crack their skull or like something.
Or they'd shatter like
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
frozen. That would be crazy. That night, she's taking a bubble bath in real time because she has no more worries. She's got all the time she needs. She has all the quiet she could ever want. But it's unfortunate that she's doing this in real time because now her husband is screaming. She comes in to find out what all the ruckus is about. Newsflash, nuclear war has begun.
We have a verification. Soviet missiles have entered U.S. airspace.
Mommy, what is it?
Come here, baby. Oh, God. What can I do? Oh, Stan, I love you. I love all you guys.
Shut up! Shut up!
She runs out into the streets of town. Everything is frozen in a tableau of pre-apocalyptic chaos. She follows the gaze of one panicked man and sees a nuclear missile about to strike ground zero. The end.
Well, at least she has time to maybe drag her family 500 miles away. Although I think the implication is that it's all out World War III and like nowhere is... Because the news guy on the radio is like, why bother? We're all fucked. It's all over. So,
Yeah, no, there are multiple, like hundreds of nukes
incoming, yeah.
inbound.
So those two people on the porch, their protest or debate wouldn't have done any good, really. It was too late by then.
Honestly,
Although perhaps years have gone by at this point.
I had so many memories of this episode. This was a very striking, impactful episode. I saw it as a kid. It did freak me the fuck out. Back then, the fear of nukes was so real that it didn't register with me as a story when the radio and the news was constantly talking about the imminent threat of nuclear war. Like, that literally went over my head or in one ear out the other when I watched this episode as a kid, because that's what the news was all the time. And so when I saw like that nuclear war broke out at the end, I was like, oh, did her fucking around with time somehow cause nuclear war? And now I'm like, oh, they very heavy-handedly worked in the idea that nuclear tensions
Peace
are
talks were
high,
breaking down.
and that the theme is that we have to keep talking to prevent disaster. We can't tell everyone to shut up because we're sick of all the noise and chaos. But as a cynical adult, I've got to say, on the one hand, those goobers who come up and knock on her door and they're like, you need to come to the debate about nuclear disarmament. Like, some town hall meeting ain't going to do shit about what the Kremlin is going to do.
Unfortunately.
And what the Pentagon is going to do. Those just things are not connected. Write a letter to your congressman if it makes you feel better. You are not determining nuclear policy. 2, it feels kind of broad to say that just because negotiators and diplomats need to keep the lines of communication open to prevent war, that this harried mom has to take care of her feckless husband and her horrible bratty kids who are hopped up on Choco Poppers putting dead snakes on the grill? Like, she should have some peace and quiet.
She just wanted quiet. I so sympathize. Did you pick this for me?
I didn't, but I was thinking about your reaction the whole time.
Wouldn't it be nice if once in a while everyone would just shut up?
Body count for Are You Afraid of the Dark?
By our criteria, they're already dead and ghosts, so I don't think it really counts. If they don't die on screen or implicitly off screen, then...
No on screen, which means that even though my episode of Twilight Zone stops seconds before the world is nuked. Body count, 0. That zeros across the board. Scare factor for Are You Afraid of the Dark?
I liked it. I think it was spooky as a child. You get those hounds coming at you. You know, disconnected though it may be. You've got old man Ghost Giles. You've got Pam acting like really spooked out and trippy and weird and crazy.
I'll give you mild spookiness. Certainly dogs were much more terrifying as a kid. Scare factor for Twilight Zone? High, because everyone was freaked out about nukes. Gross factor, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
No gross factor, except for black mold and asbestos and spores.
Gross factor for Twilight Zone, dead snake on a grill.
Yeah, pretty gross.
What the factor for Are You Afraid of the Dark? Pretty high.
Judging by the rules of which what the factor was created.
Indeed. What the factor for Twilight Zone? Low. I mean, it makes sense.
I'll debate you there, because the whole time I was thinking, like, okay, what's the Twilight Zone twist? You know, is she going to accidentally kill a bunch of people? Is the fact that she's freezing time going to have some sort of paradox creating, ramifications? And then at one point, I think when she was in the tub, I was thinking, like, oh, I know what the twist is going to be. The husband's going to turn around to shave, and then he's going to turn back around, and his wife is going to be like 90. I never saw all-out nuclear war. I thought that would have been a nice twist, but it certainly wouldn't have been the big showstopper that a suspended nuclear missile was.
Agreed. So, bit of a what the factor there, especially since when I watched it as a kid, it didn't even register that people were clamoring about the imminent threat of nuclear war, because that was just all day, every day. I feel like in these anthology shows where so much is predicated on a magic locket, that rings and lockets would go down sinks and drains all the time. And so the Twilight Zone twist should have been she stops time, she takes a bubble bath, and then the locket goes down the drain, and then she's stuck in the middle of frozen time.
Or when they test wastewater, it's like full of antibiotics and like all kinds of antidepressants and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. In this universe, it's full of magic rings. Just the most potent wastewater.
Theme of Time to Die.
Quite a bit higher in Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Twilight Zone. Totally 80s?
I didn't get a super 80s vibe from... Well, I guess the whole nuclear war thing is pretty 80s.
For me, it was harried mom, nuclear war...
Harried mom doesn't count as 80s.
Boombox in the kitchen, Choco Pops. There was a lot of stuff being made at that time about this. Basically, kids were starting to get annoying. They were starting to, like, rule the roost, and
it's only gotten worse.
The dad was really feckless, like he couldn't do anything without the wife. He was basically just a big baby himself. That was sort of an 80s thing of like, mom's gonna have to step up and do everything by herself. That really wasn't started to become a plot in the 80s. Whereas a little previous to that, it was like women being liberated, and before that, it was like Little Miss Homemaker is perfect, she can do everything.
Who was also harried. I'm thinking specifically of Melinda Dillon, who's incredibly harried in A Christmas Story, and incredibly harried in this episode.
So yeah, I would say 80s, high. Hella 90s for Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah, their clothes are like slightly 90s. The City Cousin's like a bit 90s, but more overall not so much.
Hella 60s with all the fox hunts and
the
old man ghosts. Twilight Zone wins.
Yeah, this is a good episode. I liked it.
It's an all-timer. It makes the short list for the 80s Twilight Zone series. There's a huge can of worms that opens up when you introduce this mechanic of freezing time. So my first question is, would you want that medallion?
100%.
Would you rather have the power to reverse time or to freeze time.
I'm thinking of that one movie where the guy is able to go back in time and like manipulate that woman into marrying him after he makes a bunch of mistakes. I suppose it's supposed to be a metaphor and not actual time manipulation, but it's still creepy and gross. So I guess time stop is pretty fun. Although again, you'd end up like, I don't know the rules of the time stopping medallion, but I feel like you'd probably end up aging.
So I had that same thought while watching the episode, which is that to her family and everyone else, Melinda must be aging rapidly.
Yeah.
Because between every second, she's like taking the afternoon to, go golf or go to the beach or whatever.
She's going to end up just in specialists' offices for the rest of her life after her husband.
They're going to think she has progeria or something. So she is still moving around, and she can do things like grab groceries, put them in a cart, push that cart around. And they show her getting into her car, but we don't know if she starts time to operate the car.
Oh yeah,
because there's an internal combustion engine. I don't know if a car can operate if she stopped time. It's really interesting. In almost every piece of media about time travel, if you're not going to the future, you're usually going back to the past, or you're rewinding time to undo mistakes or get out of situations. So it would seem that rewinding time is like the most powerful ability you could possibly have. But I feel like stopping time is incredibly powerful because you can escape from almost any situation because everyone's frozen. You could go get or take anything you want. You have unlimited time to prepare or think about things you want to do or how you want to react to things. There's so much that can be done with the application of freezing time. The only things I could think of were if you like fall into a well or if you get like shot with a harpoon. Those are times where you want to rewind time to before that happened.
Yeah.
Because freezing time when you have a harpoon in you or you're trapped in a place you can't get out of, that's no good.
You could definitely get into some bad trouble.
I think I would rather have time-stopping powers than rewinding powers, and also just on a psychological level. If I knew I could undo everything I've ever done, I would probably be paralyzed with decision paralysis.
Yeah.
Is this a better outcome, or should I undo it and do it again, and how far should I go back? But with time freezing, you would have unlimited time to plan something out and to react to it. So you can slice time in a way that I think is maybe a little more psychologically healthy. Not that anyone cares.
You can calm yourself down before having those arguments.
Yes. You could take that bubble bath. Now, if there is a nuke frozen in midair right before impact, what would you do in that situation?
Well, she doesn't have the technical know-how to get to it and dismantle it or deactivate it.
When I saw this as a kid, I was like, what I would do is I would get a crane.
Put a trampoline under it.
I would go up there, I would turn the missile around so that it would fly up and away. And it occurred to me this time watching it, like, oh, those ICBMs that flew there on their own from Russia probably have some kind of guidance system.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it would go back to Russia or the ocean.
I think know. It would. If they did, I mean, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, but I mean, even the rockets that flew to the moon, it's like they just point it and shoot it. They don't have. You know, they didn't have GPS in the 80s, or maybe they had some.
They had internal navigation systems so that the missile would go to the place it was launched. But in this scenario, it's not like there's only one missile. So there are missiles all over the earth. And let's say you can somehow get around the country and stop all the missiles from hitting America.
Well, yeah, it's the sort of Damocles. There's literally nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. And you're going to be going into a nuclear winter, like, anyway, and radioactive fallout. It's a whole thing.
The only thing she could do is just leave time frozen, grow old, die. And then if the universe isn't frozen, eventually aliens discover a frozen Earth and one skeleton in the center of it still wearing a time-stopping medallion.
It's funny how quickly you go to aliens. Whenever anything strange happens, you're like, well, then when the aliens come down.
We were talking about space. Well, because I thought it would be a fun story if you discovered a planet where everyone was frozen. But there's probably like 20 Twilight Zone episodes where that exact thing happens.
That's not fair. That's not fair at all. There was time now. There was all the time I needed. Not fair. Not fair.